We finished up with circles, so I'm going to erase all these. I'm going to select all my objects, push E on the keyboard, and push the spacebar. And that's the erase command. Now we're going to go back and we're going to go back. Now we're going to look at arcs. You can see there's a lot of different ways to create arcs. I'm only going to show you a few of them because I only routinely use them. The first one is your simple 3-point arc. Much like a 3-point circle, your 3-point arc will allow you to pick any 3 points on the arc. By doing this, you lose all control of picking a radius on the arc. There is an option that will allow you to pick a radius on an arc. Some of them, we have a few options here: start, center, and end. So, in this case, the start point of the arc, which is the first point on the arc that we're going to select. So I'm just going to pick a point out in space. Next, I'm going to create the center point of the arc, and let's say I want it to be right here. And now, using those 2 points, that established my radius point. And I can pick the start and end point. Now, if you'll notice, you have an option here. It says hold control to switch direction. Well, what if you want the arc to be filled in here and vacant all the way around the rest of the way? Well, that's when you hold down the control key. There we go. And you can left click to finish. Let's do that again. Pick the start point of my arc, and typically when an arc is created this way, it wants to move counterclockwise and fill the arc in that direction, which is starting from 0, if you remember your polar coordinates, and moving in a positive direction, which is counterclockwise. So here's the start point of my arc. This time I'm going to create my arc going this direction. And now as I move my cursor, and you can see those snaps that still want to show up. They still want to be helpful and lock me into 0 degrees, 90 degrees. You can actually change those. If I come down over here, you'll see this little guy. If I right click, this is my polar tracking. I want to change this from 90-degree increments into 45-degree increments. So if I change this, and 45 is usually where I leave this setting at. So it's snapping in 45-degree increments now instead of 90-degree increments. Let's bring this around to here, left click, and I'm done. Next option. I don't typically use start center angle. I haven't used start center length. Most of these I haven't used. I will use start end and direction, and that can be kind of handy. And one of the things we haven't done yet, and I'm about to do this the first time, is when you start drawing something, you can actually snap onto the end point of another object. And that's what that little green square was. So I canceled out. Left click on this arc command. You'll notice that green square will show up. And that tells me that AutoCAD, once again, is trying to be helpful. It's making sure that the object I'm about to draw and this existing object, the endpoints meet. If you're familiar with trying to use the bucket tool in Paint, if you don't have closed boundaries, the flood tool will just continue out into everywhere, and it doesn't always give you the results you want. We have similar functionality in AutoCAD for creating fills and hatch patterns. And if these elements don't meet, if they don't touch, then the flood won't create the right way. So I'm going to select this object, or select that endpoint, and it's going to ask me for the end point of the arc. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to select this point. And now it's going to ask me for, it's asking to establish a tangent is what it's doing. And again, you can see AutoCAD is trying to be helpful. You can see that dashed green line there as an implied extension of that second arc that I selected on. I don't have to use it. I can come back, I can click on anything or click on nothing. But since it's actually kind of handy, I'm going to left click. Now, this is different than a tangent radius circle. And there are other ways to create a nice smooth transition, because if I zoom in here, if I get close enough, you can see these two arcs aren't exactly tangent. They're not very smooth. And if I zoom out and if I come over here, these arcs definitely don't meet and transition smooth. It actually comes to a sharp point. It's a very wide open angle, but it's a sharp point. There is a way to make that a perfectly smooth transition, and we'll get to that in another video. We do have an option, excuse me, we have an option to start any arc with the center point, which can come in handy. If I want to start here at the center point, center, start, and end. And again, any one of these, before I click on any of them, if I just hold my mouse there, I'll get that expanded, call it an index card, a quick little online help, but they will give you the super Cliff Notes version of how to make this command work and do its thing. And there's another arc here that says, creates an arc tangent to the last arc drawn. So it just remembers the very last thing that you drew, and it will automatically make the next thing that you draw, the next arc that you draw, tangent to the last object. It can be great, it really can be handy. But if I want to create a 3-point arc here, but if I want to draw another arc tangent to this, and I say continue, well, it only remembers the last thing, remembers the last point that I drew, not necessarily the one that I want to draw from. So just bear that in mind. I clicked escape there to cancel out of that. Feel free, play around with every single one of these, find ones that work for you. I'm sharing the ones that work for me. That's arcs.